The plate shattered before anyone realized what had happened. Crystal fragments skidded across the polished obsidian floor, the sharp sound echoing through the vast dining chamber like a gunshot. Servants froze. The hovering lights dimmed instinctively, reacting to the sudden spike in tension. At the center of it all stood Valeries Kale, one of the wealthiest beings in the outer spiral, an alien matriarch whose name alone could move markets and topple governments. And yet, in that moment, she looked small. Her long, silver fingers trembled. Her breath came in uneven pulses. Her luminous violet eyes were locked on something across the room, something impossible. "No," she whispered. Across the chamber, near the panoramic window that revealed a swirl of distant galaxies, stood her daughter. Standing, not floating in a support harness, not lying in a grav chair, not motionless as she had been for years. Standing. Elora. Valeries choked, her voice breaking in a way no one had ever heard before. The young girl, slender, fragile, her limbs once lifeless, was trembling but upright. Her bare feet pressed against the cold floor, toes curling as if rediscovering sensation for the first time. I can feel it," Elora said, her voice barely above a breath. "Mother, I can feel the ground." A servant gasped. Another dropped to their knees, overwhelmed. Valeries didn't move. She couldn't. Because this wasn't just unlikely. It was impossible. For 6 cycles, Elora Kale had not moved. Not after the accident. Not after the fall from the orbital terrace, a fall that should have killed her, but instead left her trapped in her own body. Her mind sharp, her awareness intact, but her body, dead weight. The finest physicians across 12 star systems had tried. Neural regeneration, quantum spine reconstruction, biosynthetic grafting, even experimental time reversal therapy. Nothing worked. Every expert had said the same thing in different words. Her neural pathways are severed beyond repair. She will never walk again. Valeries had spent fortunes trying to prove them wrong. She had failed. Until her eyes snapped toward the far end of the room, toward the human. He stood quietly near the doorway, as if unsure whether he should stay or leave. Compared to the towering alien architecture, he looked almost insignificant, shorter, less imposing, dressed in simple, functional clothing instead of the ornate fabrics of Valeries' court. His name was Daniel Hayes, and he did not belong here. "You," Valeries' voice cracked as she pointed at him, her tone suddenly sharp, dangerous. "What did you do?" The room tensed instantly. Security drones hummed to life overhead. Daniel raised his hands slowly, palms open. "Calm. Measured." "I didn't do anything," he said. Valeries' eyes burned. "Do not lie to me, human." "I'm not," he replied, steady. "I just helped her try something different." Elora took another step. It was clumsy, weak. Her knee buckled slightly, but she caught herself. The entire room inhaled sharply. Valeries staggered forward. Another step. And another. Elora's face lit up, not with grace, not with perfection, but with raw, overwhelming joy. "I'm doing it," she whispered, tears forming. "Mother, I'm really doing it." Valeries reached her just as Elora stumbled again, catching her before she could fall. For a moment, the powerful alien matriarch held her daughter like she had when she was small, fragile, terrified, and infinitely precious. "How?" Valeries whispered into her hair. "How is this possible?" Elora pulled back, her glowing eyes shining brighter than they had in years. "It was him," she said, turning slightly toward Daniel. He didn't fix me. He taught me. Valerius slowly looked up. That was worse. Because if this human hadn't fixed Elora, then everything her scientists had believed, everything she had believed, was wrong. Hours earlier, the room had been silent. Elora sat in her grav chair, staring out at the stars she would never walk beneath again. "I don't want another specialist," she said flatly. Daniel stood behind her, adjusting a small device on the back of the chair. "I'm not a specialist," he replied. "Then what are you?" He paused. "Someone who doesn't think you're broken." Elora almost laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Everyone says that," she muttered, "right before they fail." Daniel stepped into view, crouching slightly so he was at her eye level. "I'm not here to fix you," he said. "I'm here to prove something." Her eyes narrowed. "What?" "That your body isn't the problem." Silence. Then, "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard." "Maybe," he shrugged. "But humor me." Elora studied him. He didn't look like the others. No arrogance. No polished certainty. No pity. Just stubbornness. "What do I have to lose?" she said quietly. Daniel smiled faintly. "That's the spirit. Back in the present." Valerius helped Elora sit down, her hands still shaking. Then she stood, slowly, deliberately, and turned toward the human. Every instinct she had screamed that this shouldn't be possible, that something unnatural had happened, that this human had done something dangerous. But her daughter had walked. "Explain," Valerius demanded. Daniel hesitated, not out of fear, but calculation. "You're not going to like the answer," he said. Valerius' gaze sharpened. "I didn't ask whether I would like it." A pause. Then Daniel exhaled. "Your entire civilization has been trying to repair her body," he said. "But you ignored something basic." Valerius' voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "And that is—" Daniel met her eyes. "The human brain doesn't give up on broken connections." Silence fell again. Heavy. Pressurized. Valerius didn't understand. Not yet. But something in her chest tightened, because for the first time in years, hope felt real and terrifying. Valerius Kale had built her empire on one unshakable truth. Perfection was achievable. Her species had eliminated disease. They had mapped consciousness. They had engineered bodies that could outlive stars. There were no mysteries left. And yet, a human had just proven her entire civilization wrong. "Say it again," Valerius demanded, her voice low and controlled. Daniel didn't flinch. "The problem isn't her body," he repeated. "It's how her brain was taught to use it." A ripple of disbelief spread through the chamber. One of the senior medical advisers, a tall, multi-limbed being draped in ceremonial biotech strands, stepped forward. "That is biologically incorrect," they said sharply. "Her neural pathways were severed. Completely. We verified it at the quantum level." Daniel nodded. "I don't doubt that." "Then your statement is contradictory." "It would be," Daniel said calmly, "if your model of recovery was complete. That did it." Valeri's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You stand in my home," she said, her voice now carrying the weight of command that had broken entire worlds, "and imply that my scientists, the greatest in the galaxy, are incomplete?" Daniel met her gaze without hesitation. "Yes." The word hit harder than any insult. Security drones lowered slightly, humming louder. But Valerius didn't give the order, because Elora was watching. and Elora was smiling. "Mother," Elora said softly, "just listen to him." That stopped everything. Valeri's turned slowly. Her daughter hadn't smiled like that in years. Not politely, not to reassure others, but genuinely. Alive. Valeri's exhaled slowly, then gestured. "Explain." "Everything." Daniel nodded once. "All right," he said. "But I need you to forget something first." Valeri's tone sharpened again. "Be careful, human. You need to forget that healing only comes from fixing damage." Silence. The medical advisor scoffed. "That is the foundation of all regenerative science." "Yeah," Daniel said. "And it works great, until it doesn't." He stepped forward slightly, glancing at Elora. "When her injury happened, your doctors tried to rebuild the damaged neural pathways, right?" "Yes," Valeri's replied. "Repeatedly. And when that failed, you concluded the system was irreparable." "That is correct." Daniel nodded. "That's where humans do things differently." He walked closer, stopping a respectful distance away. "In human medicine, especially with spinal injuries, we've learned something strange." Valeri's crossed her arms. "Speak plainly." Daniel did. "The brain cheats." A pause. No one reacted. So he continued. "When a connection is destroyed, the brain doesn't always wait for it to be repaired. Sometimes it finds a way around it." The advisor shook their head immediately. "Impossible. Neural mapping is precise. There are no redundant pathways for full motor function." Daniel smiled faintly. "That's what we thought too. A long time ago." Elora leaned forward slightly, her eyes fixed on him. "You said my body wasn't the problem," she said. "What did you mean?" Daniel looked at her. "I meant your body was waiting for instructions that were never going to come." Valeri's voice cut in. "Because the pathways were severed." "Right," Daniel said. "So your doctors tried to rebuild the same pathways." "Of course. And when that didn't work, they stopped." A heavy silence followed. "Because that part was true." Daniel crouched slightly, picking up a small, thin device from the floor, something simple compared to the advanced alien technology surrounding them. "I didn't try to fix the old pathways," he said. "I helped her build new ones." The advisor's tone turned icy. "That would require neural plasticity beyond her species' limits." Daniel glanced at them. "Yeah, about that." Elora let out a small laugh. "They told me the same thing," she said. "That my brain couldn't adapt like that." Valeri's looked at her sharply. "And yet, you walked." Elora nodded. Slowly. "Not at first," she admitted. "At first, nothing happened." Her fingers tightened slightly on the armrest. "It was frustrating, painful, exhausting." Daniel spoke quietly, because her brain didn't believe it was possible. Valeri's frowned. "Belief is irrelevant to biological function." Daniel shook his head. "Not for humans." He stood again, facing Valeri's fully now. "You've optimized everything," he said. "Your bodies, your systems, your medicine." "Yes. But optimization has a downside." Valeri's didn't like where this was going. "And that is—" Daniel's voice softened, but his words hit harder than before. "You stopped experimenting when things got messy." The room went cold. Because he wasn't just talking about medicine anymore. He was talking about their entire civilization. "You rely on precision," Daniel continued. "Exact solutions. perfect outcomes. That is strength, the advisor snapped. It is, Daniel agreed, until you hit a problem that doesn't have a clean solution. He gestured toward Elora. This wasn't a clean problem. Valeries looked at her daughter again, at the way her legs trembled slightly even while sitting, at the way she kept flexing her toes, as if afraid the sensation might disappear. How? Valeries whispered. What did you do to her? Daniel hesitated for the first time, not because he was afraid, but because he knew what the answer sounded like. Nothing advanced, he said finally. Valeries' gaze sharpened. Explain. Daniel took a breath. I made her try to move. Every single day. A pause. That is all, the advisor said, disbelief dripping from every word. No, Daniel said. That's just the start. He looked at Elora. I made her fail. Silence. Deep. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Valeries didn't understand. Failure was something her people eliminated, avoided, engineered out of existence. You're saying, she said slowly, that you intentionally made my daughter suffer repeated failure? Daniel met her eyes. Yes. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Dangerously. But Elora spoke before anything could happen. It worked. All eyes turned to her. Her voice was steady, certain. He didn't let me stop, she said, even when nothing happened, even when I couldn't feel anything. Her hands trembled slightly. I hated him for it. Daniel gave a small, unapologetic nod. Fair. Elora's lips curved faintly. But then, something changed. Valeries leaned forward, her entire being focused on her daughter. What changed? Elora's eyes filled with something deeper than joy. Something almost sacred. My foot moved, she whispered, and across the room. For the first time since this began, Valeries felt something she had not experienced in years. Not power, not control, but awe. The room didn't feel the same anymore. Moments ago, it had been a place of control, precision, certainty, perfection. Now, it felt unstable, like something fundamental had shifted beneath reality itself. My foot moved. Elora's words lingered in the air, soft, but heavier than any command Valeries had ever given. Valeries stepped closer, her sharp gaze locked onto her daughter. You are certain? She asked quietly. Elora nodded. I didn't imagine it. It was small, barely anything, but it was mine. Her fingers curled slightly, as if reliving the moment. I did that. Valeries turned slowly toward Daniel. And you expected this outcome? Daniel hesitated. No. That answer hit harder than confidence ever could. You experimented, Valeries said, her voice tightening, on my daughter without certainty. Daniel didn't back down. I gave her a chance when everyone else had given up. The advisor snapped. We did not give up. We reached a final conclusion based on irrefutable data. Daniel looked at them. Yeah, he said quietly. Humans have a long history of being wrong about final conclusions. That struck deeper than it should have, because their civilization didn't make mistakes like that. Not anymore. Valeries raised a hand, silencing the room. Continue, she ordered. Daniel nodded. After her foot moved, everything changed, he said. Not physically, at least not right away. Elora smiled faintly. My brain woke up. The advisor immediately interjected. That is not a measurable state. Ellora looked at them, her voice calm, but firm. "It is when you've lived without it." Silence followed. Daniel stepped in. Before that moment, her brain had essentially accepted that her lower body was gone, he explained. Not physically, but functionally. Valeries frowned. "Elaborate." "She stopped trying to send signals," Daniel said, "because every attempt failed. Over and over again." "That is logical," the advisor replied. "Repeated failure reinforces system inefficiency." Daniel nodded. "Exactly. Your entire system is built on efficiency." Valeri's eyes narrowed slightly. "And yours is not." Daniel smiled faintly. "Ours is built on stubbornness." A few confused glances spread across the room. Daniel continued. "Humans don't always stop when something doesn't work. Sometimes we keep going just to prove we can." Ellora let out a quiet laugh. "He's underselling it," she said. "He wouldn't let me quit." Flashback. Days earlier. "I can't do it." Ellora snapped, her voice breaking. "Nothing is happening." She sat in the grav chair, her entire body trembling, not from effort, but from frustration. Daniel stood in front of her, arms crossed. "Good," he said. Her head snapped up. "Good. Yeah. Means you're trying." "That's your standard," she shot back. "Failure." Daniel shrugged. "Failure's part of the process." Ellora's eyes burned. "Your process is broken." "Maybe," he said. "But it's the only one that's ever worked for us." Back in the present. Valeri's voice cut through the memory. "And this process," she said, "led to full motor recovery?" Daniel shook his head. "No," he said. "It led to something more important." Valeri's stiffened. "Explain." Daniel looked directly at her. It taught her brain that the rules were wrong. That sentence didn't belong in their universe. Rules weren't wrong. They were discovered, defined, perfected. The advisor's tone sharpened dangerously. Biological laws are not subjective. Daniel tilted his head slightly. "No," he agreed. "But our understanding of them is." A ripple of unease spread through the room. Because that distinction was dangerous. Ellora shifted slightly in her seat. "At first it didn't make sense," she admitted. "I couldn't feel anything. I couldn't move anything." She looked at her hands. "But he kept telling me to imagine it." Valeri's frowned. "Imagining movement does not create it." Daniel stepped in. "No," he said. "But it activates the same neural regions." The advisor froze. "That is partially accurate." Daniel nodded. "Humans figured that out a long time ago. Visualization can trigger neural activity even without physical response." He gestured toward Ellora. "So we used that." Valeri's mind raced. "You stimulated inactive neural regions without restoring the original pathways." "Yes. That should not result in motor function." "It didn't," Daniel said. "At first." Ellora leaned forward slightly. "It felt pointless," she said. "Every day, trying to move something that wouldn't respond." Her voice softened. "But then, one day, something almost happened." Valeri's breath caught slightly. "The foot." Ellora nodded. "It wasn't strong. It wasn't controlled. But it was real." Daniel stepped closer, his tone more serious now. "And that's when things got complicated." Valeri's eyes sharpened instantly. "Define complicated." Daniel exhaled slowly. Because that shouldn't have been possible. Silence. Heavy. Unforgiving. The advisor stepped forward again, their voice now carrying something new. Not arrogance. Concern. Our species does not possess that level of neural plasticity, they said. It was genetically optimized out generations ago. Valeri's turned sharply. What? The advisor hesitated, then spoke carefully. To eliminate instability, they explained, adaptation variability was reduced. Neural pathways are fixed, reliable. Valeri's gaze darkened. You are saying, my daughter's brain did something it is not designed to do? The advisor lowered their head slightly. Yes. And suddenly, this wasn't a miracle anymore. It was a problem. Valeri's turned slowly toward Daniel. You altered her beyond her species' limits. Daniel didn't respond immediately, because the truth was, he had, but not in the way they thought. I didn't change her, he said finally. Valeri's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. Then what did you do? Daniel met her eyes. I showed her something your entire civilization forgot. A pause. Then, how to adapt. The word echoed like a threat, because in a galaxy built on perfection, adaptation meant one thing, unpredictability, and unpredictability was dangerous. Elora slowly pushed herself up again, weak, shaking, but standing. I don't feel broken anymore, she said softly. Valeri's stared at her, at what she had become, at what she shouldn't have been able to become, and for the first time, fear crept in, not for her daughter, but for what this meant, because if one perfect being could change, then none of them were truly fixed. The word adapt lingered in the air like a threat no one wanted to acknowledge. Valeri's Kale stood motionless, her gaze fixed on her daughter, but her mind was racing far beyond this room. Adaptation, unpredictability, instability. These weren't just biological traits. They were things her civilization had erased. On purpose. Explain, Valeri's said quietly. But this time, the command wasn't aimed at Daniel. It was aimed at her own advisor. The tall, multi-limbed figure stiffened. My lady, they began carefully, this matter is not. Explain, Valeri's repeated. Sharper, colder. There was no disobeying that tone. The advisor lowered their head slightly. Very well. A pause. Then, long before our civilization reached perfection, we were not stable. The room grew still. Even the drones seemed to quiet. We evolved rapidly, the advisor continued. Too rapidly. Our neural structures were highly adaptive, constantly changing, constantly rewriting themselves. Daniel crossed his arms slightly. Sounds familiar. The advisor ignored him. At first, it was considered a strength, they said. We could recover from injuries, learn faster, evolve within a single lifetime. Elora frowned slightly. That sounds good. It was, the advisor said, until it wasn't. Valeri's didn't interrupt, but her eyes darkened, because she already sensed where this was going. Our adaptability made us unpredictable, the advisor said, not just physically, but mentally. A pause. Personalities shifted. Loyalties changed. Entire individuals became unrecognizable. A chill ran through the room. Daniel's voice was quieter now. How bad did it get? The advisor hesitated, then answered. We nearly destroyed ourselves. Silence. Heavy. Absolute. Conflicts escalated without pattern, they continued. Leaders changed their ideologies within cycles. Entire populations became unstable. Valeries spoke softly. Our history calls it the fracturing. Elora looked between them. I've never heard of that. You were never meant to, Valeries said. The advisor continued. To survive. We made a decision. Daniel already knew the answer, but he let them say it. We removed variability. The words landed like a final verdict. We stabilized our neural architecture, the advisor explained. Reduced plasticity. Reinforced fixed pathways. Elora's voice dropped. You made yourselves permanent. Yes. Daniel exhaled slowly. And in doing that, you lost the ability to adapt. The advisor didn't deny it. We eliminated instability, they corrected. Daniel shook his head slightly. No, he said. You eliminated change. Valeries turned toward him sharply. Be careful, human. But her voice lacked its earlier certainty. Because deep down, she knew. Elora looked at her hands again. So, what I did, she said slowly, that wasn't supposed to happen. No, the advisor said immediately. It was not. Daniel stepped forward slightly. But it did. That was the problem. Valeries turned back to her daughter. Stand again, she said. Elora hesitated, then nodded. Slowly, carefully, she pushed herself up. Her legs trembled violently this time, more than before. Daniel noticed immediately. Hey, he said, stepping forward instinctively. But Elora shook her head. No, she said through clenched teeth. I want to try. She took a step, then another. But something was wrong. Her movement wasn't just unsteady. It was inconsistent. Her left leg responded slower than her right. Her balance shifted unpredictably. Her body wasn't following a fixed pattern anymore. Valeries saw it instantly, and her expression changed. This is not stable, she said sharply. The advisor agreed. It is not. Elora stumbled slightly, and this time she didn't recover cleanly. Daniel caught her before she hit the ground. I've got you, he said quietly. Elora's breathing was uneven. It felt different, she whispered, like my body didn't know what it was doing. Daniel's jaw tightened. Yeah, he said softly. That's part of it. Valeries stepped closer, her voice now edged with something new. Fear. What is happening to her? Daniel looked at Elora, then back at Valeries, and for the first time, he didn't have a reassuring answer. Her brain is rewriting itself, he said. The room went completely still. That process, the advisor said immediately, was removed for a reason. Daniel nodded. I figured. Valeries' voice dropped to a near whisper. Is she in danger? Daniel hesitated, and that hesitation said everything. Yes, he admitted. Elora looked up at him. But it's also the only reason I can walk, isn't it? Daniel met her eyes. Yeah. Valeries turned away, her mind racing. For years, she had tried to save her daughter, to restore her, to bring her back to what she was. But now, that wasn't what was happening. Elora wasn't being restored. She was becoming something new, and that terrified her. What are the risks? Valeri's demanded. Daniel exhaled slowly. We don't fully know, he admitted. Even in humans, neuroplasticity at this level can be unpredictable. The advisor added coldly. In our species, it was catastrophic. Elora sat quietly, absorbing it all. Then, she laughed. Softly. All eyes turned to her. I spent years unable to move, she said. Trapped. Frozen. Perfectly stable. She looked up at her mother. At least now, something is happening. Valeri's expression tightened. You do not understand the danger. Elora shook her head. No, she said. I understand it perfectly. She slowly pulled herself back up again, ignoring the tremble, ignoring the uncertainty. I'd rather be unstable and alive, she said quietly, than perfect and broken. That sentence hit harder than anything Daniel had said, because it wasn't human. It was her. Valeri's stared at her daughter, at the strength in her eyes, at the defiance, at the change, and for the first time, she realized something terrifying. This wasn't just about Elora anymore. If this worked, if this spread, it wouldn't just change one life. It would undo everything her civilization had built. Valeri's turned slowly toward Daniel. Her voice calm, too calm. No one else can know about this. Daniel frowned. That's not your call. Valeri's eyes hardened. It is now. The drones above shifted, locking into position. And just like that, the miracle became a secret. The drones locked into place with a low, threatening hum. Dozens of them, precision-built, perfectly synchronized, weapons charged, all aimed at one human. Daniel didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't even raise his hands this time. He just looked at Valeri's. You really want to do this? He asked quietly. Valeri's Kale stood at the center of the room, her expression carved from control, but her eyes betrayed the storm beneath. This cannot leave this room, she said. Not shouted, not emotional. Decided. Elora's voice cut through the tension. Mother, no. Valeri's didn't look at her. You don't understand what this means, she said. Elora stepped forward, unsteady, trembling, but standing. That's exactly why we can't hide it. The advisor moved quickly. My lady, she is compromised. Her neural state is unstable. Her judgment cannot be considered reliable. Elora snapped back instantly. My judgment is the only reason I'm standing. The room froze. Daniel exhaled slowly. This is the part where you decide what matters more, he said to Valeri's. Control or truth? Valeri's gaze flickered. For a fraction of a second. But it was enough. Truth, she repeated coldly. You call this truth? She gestured sharply toward Elora. My daughter is rewriting herself into something unpredictable, something dangerous. Daniel nodded once. Yeah, he said. That's what growth looks like. The advisor stepped forward again. My lady, we cannot allow this to spread. If others attempt this adaptation, they might change, Daniel finished. They will destabilize, the advisor corrected. Daniel looked at them. And what if that's exactly what you need? That question hit harder than any argument, because deep down, they all knew the answer. Valeri's turned away, pacing slowly now, every step controlled, measured, but inside, nothing was certain anymore. She had spent her entire life building order, eliminating risk, perfecting a system where nothing unexpected could happen. And now, her daughter stood behind her, living proof that perfection had a cost. "Mother!" Ellara's voice was softer now, not defiant, not angry, just real. Valeri's stopped, but didn't turn. "I know you're scared," Ellara said. That alone was enough to send a ripple through the room. No one spoke to Valeri's Kale like that. No one dared. But Ellara continued. "I was too," she said, "when I couldn't move, when nothing worked." Her voice trembled slightly. "But that wasn't living." Valeri's hands tightened at her sides. "This is," Ellara said, taking another shaky step forward. "Even now, even with the drones, even with the risk. This is messy," she admitted. "It's hard. It's unpredictable. A small breath. But it's mine." Daniel didn't speak. He didn't need to, because this wasn't about humans anymore. This was about choice. Valeri's slowly turned. Her eyes locked onto her daughter, really looked at her, not as something broken, not as something to be fixed, but as something becoming. "You could lose yourself," Valeri said quietly. Ellara nodded. "I know. You could become unstable, dangerous. I know." A pause. "But I could also become something more," Ellara said. Silence. Because that possibility had never existed in their world. The advisor stepped forward urgently. "My lady, this is exactly the thinking that led to the fracturing. We cannot return to that chaos." Valeri's closed her eyes for a moment. Just one. And in that moment, she saw it all. A civilization frozen in perfection, unchanging, unyielding, safe. And her daughter, laughing for the first time in years. Standing, trying, failing, living. Valeri's opened her eyes. "Stand down," she said. The drones didn't move. The advisor froze. "My lady," I said. Valeri's repeated, her voice now carrying absolute authority. "Stand down." One by one, the drones powered down. Weapons dimming. Threat gone. A breath released across the room. Daniel gave a small nod. "Good call." Valeri's didn't respond to him. Not yet. Instead, she walked toward Ellara. Slowly, deliberately. Ellara held her ground, even as her legs trembled. Valeri's stopped in front of her, close enough to see every micromovement, every imperfection, every sign of change. Then, gently, she placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "You are not what I tried to save," Valeri said. Ellara's breath caught slightly. "You are something else entirely." A pause. Something softer entered Valeri's voice. Something no one in that room had ever heard before. "And I will not lose you again, trying to make you perfect." Ellara smiled. Not because everything was solved, not because it was safe, but because, for the first time, her mother understood. Valeri's straightened, then turned to Daniel. "You will remain," she said. "Not a request. A decision." Daniel raised an eyebrow slightly. "Didn't expect that." "You have introduced a variable we do not understand," Valeri's continued. "That makes you valuable." A slight pause. "And dangerous." Daniel smirked faintly. "Welcome to humanity." A few uneasy glances spread across the room. Valeri's looked out toward the stars beyond the glass. For the first time in a long time, they didn't look mapped, or known, or controlled. They looked open. "This does not leave this world," she said finally. Daniel tilted his head. "Temporary decision?" Valeri's didn't answer immediately, because for the first time, she wasn't certain of the future, and that uncertainty didn't feel like weakness. It felt like possibility. Behind her, Elora took another step. Unsteady, imperfect, but real. And this time, Valeri's didn't reach to stop her.